Welcome to the Court of History. I'm Sean Wilentz with my co-host, Sidney Blumenthal. And we're here to talk today about tariffs. I tell my students there's nothing more boring to study about American history than the history of the tariff, maybe land policy. But the history of the tariff, notorious for being a boring subject, it's not boring anymore, thanks to this administration. And, the administration has taken it upon itself to make tariffs the centerpiece of its policies, of its entire way of going about things. Tariffs are the answer to everything. Well, there's a problem with that because the president does not have the power to, under the Constitution, to unilaterally pass tariffs or enact new tariffs. So, of course, it's going to the Supreme Court, where it was literally argued today. And Sidney, how important do you think these arguments are going to be politically, but also where tariffs fit into Trump's overall political plan?
Well, tariffs are absolutely essential to Trump's economic plan and to his view of the world, since he has seized the tariff power from the Congress. He has operated on a law that grants the president emergency powers, but it's never been used in its 50-year history for tariffs. It's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Two courts have struck down Trump's use of tariffs, which he uses as a shakedown mechanism and to completely realign the world economic order and destroy all the trade agreements that essentially were put in place since World War II. The U.S. Court of International Trade unanimously struck him down. And then the U.S. District Court of the Federal Circuit struck this down. And it's gone before the Supreme Court. Apparently, in the argument that took place, the justices were mostly skeptical of the administration's arguments, which are highly dubious, based on a complete misunderstanding of what a trade deficit is and how it operates. It's economically illiterate. So they've claimed that there's a trade deficit and therefore they can claim emergency powers. And that trade deficits are not what Trump says they are. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not how the economy works. And then he's claimed in a non sequitur the fentanyl crisis. What does this have to do with, say, slapping exorbitant tariffs on Switzerland?
Yes.
Which is killing its watch industry.
Yes. Yes.
This is just nonsense. And of course,
and capriciousness. In a certain way, it's realigning the world economic order to fit his crime syndicate future. In some ways, I think it's what he wants to do. Because, as you say, it's all about shakedowns.
This is an economic order created on the basis of the shakedown principle.
Exactly, which is why I say it's a crime syndicate. But recently he just added a 10% tariff, slapped a 10% tariff on Canada. Now we all know why he did that. It wasn't because Canada was sending down even more fentanyl. It was because, tell us the story of what happened.
Well, as I say, Halloween came early for Donald Trump. He was spooked by the ghost of Ronald Reagan. Yeah. The province of Ontario put up an ad during the World Series when the Toronto Blue Jays were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers in the first game, featuring Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, giving a radio talk in April 1987, in which he explained the danger of trade wars. And Trump went crazy and immediately slapped an additional 10% tariff on Canada. The Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, felt obligated. It was his sad duty to apologize for the running of an excerpt of a talk by Ronald Reagan.
What a terrible thing to do to a Republican president. Remind him of Ronald Reagan.
It's the ghost of conservatism past.
Right.
And Reagan really believed in free trade, unlike, Trump's shakedown trade policy.
Right.
There's a difference in atmosphere too. Reagan is not, he's not the person who is angry and
Yes.
scowling.
Yes.
He is mourning in America. He's going to make you happy.
All very evocative.
Grim Reaper.
Now, Trump had threatened to attend the oral arguments. He didn't show up today, did he?
No, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, may have shown up. This is another mafia ploy where you sit or threaten to sit and face the judges, and you better rule the right way. Of course, if the judges rule the other way, then you may have affected the decision that way. In either case, you have warped the independence of the court. And Trump does not believe in independent courts any more than he believes in the independence of anybody or his cabinet members. So this was very much like the scene from The Godfather, where Frank Pantangeli, the witness, is going to appear before the committee, and the mafia bosses put his brother sitting behind him, and he switches his testimony, and so that kind of.
I knew nothing about it.
I don't remember.
I don't remember a thing. I don't know anymore.
That's not at all what the fact.
He's done this with Beauvais and Bondi too. I mean, this is a standard
before
thing.
When he nominated Trump, did this before.
Yeah,
he's done this ridiculous Godfather play before with Emile Beauvais, his thuggish former Justice Department official, who fired all the prosecutors in the Justice Department who worked in the January 6th cases, right, who he elevated as a reward to a federal appeals court judgeship in Pennsylvania. And at the confirmation hearing, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and her deputy, Todd Blanche, another personal attorney of Trump's, sat behind Emile Beauvais staring at the senators.
Well, it's not going to work so well with the Supreme Court, I don't think. I mean, Frank Pantangelo, to the contrary notwithstanding, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's why he backed off and sent his flunky Bessent. But so let's suppose the Supreme Court rules against the administration, right? What is the fallout? What is going to happen? I mean, how catastrophic would this be for the Trump administration?
Well, Justice Amy Coney Barrett asked in the argument today, how does this get paid for? I mean, Trump has created a situation where if he doesn't get his way, he's created complete chaos. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars collected in duties, much of it beginning to be passed on to the American consumer in price increases, which accounts in part for the increase in inflation right, that Trump promised he would bring down.
The idea of putting on tariffs in order to lower inflation is just, I mean, even I can't balance my checkbook right, but I know that's stupid economics. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Trump says inflation's gone down now. So who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes, right. When you go to the grocery store and look at the shelf? So that's so there's going to be chaos in returning all these duties to where they belong. So at the least, that's what he's done. And then he will attempt, I believe, to cite all kinds of other laws to try and create a patchwork system to redo what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But the damage has been done to the economy. The damage has been done to our trade partners. Mm-hmm. The damage has been done to our foreign policy. The damage has been done to the prestige and good name of the United States and its reputation. Mm-hmm. And to our allies. If a foreign adversary had devised a plan to undermine the United States, it could not have done better.
Which, of course, begs all sorts of questions that maybe I don't want to go into, and maybe I do. Because in many ways, this administration, if it was a foreign adversary, it could not have done more damage to the United States than what this administration has done.
Well, this is just one of the many ways in which the United States has been undermined. Yeah. And the United States has been diminished greatly by the Trump administration. Far from making America great again, what he's done again is what happened to the United States in the late 1920s and early 30s in helping to create the conditions that wreck our economic relationships. Of course, this is what Ronald Reagan was talking about.
Well, let's talk about Ronald Reagan, though, because yes, it was particularly rankling, I think, to Trump to have Reagan there, not just because of but Reagan is still thought of as kind of the FDR of the Republican Party. He's their great hero. Here he's getting dressed down by a hologram, but nevertheless getting dressed down. But he had personal relations with Reagan, didn't he? And they were not all that happy, as I recall.
He did not really have a personal relationship.
But he tried to. He wanted to.
Trump was a wannabe,
right?
And he was trying to wheedle himself into the presence of Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. And as much as Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy exalted the wealthy and brought them around them, Trump was a bridge too far. He was too vulgar for them, and Trump kept, attempting to get an association with Reagan.
Right. Just for why? Just because he was the president, or he was popular?
Yeah, because it would help. It would enhance his business prospects,
right?
And then he could flourish that as though he were a very important person, a VIP, and connected. Right. So he, in 1983, this is early in Trump's career, Trump builds Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. And asks Reagan to send a congratulatory telegram.
This is like getting people to back him up for the Nobel Prize, right? This is just a smaller version of that.
Yeah, no, he did not get the telegram for building Trump Tower from Ronald Reagan. But then, having failed at that, his next ploy was to invite Ronald Reagan to attend a concert given by LaToya Jackson, just what Ronald Reagan wanted to do.
I imagine Nancy would have been very, very eager to get there.
Yeah. Would have been
right, just her style.
Completely comfortable at the Taj Mahal Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City.
Sure.
And no, that didn't work out either. The Reagans were never at the Taj Mahal for the LaToya Jackson concert.
But Reagan did finally get his way in, didn't he? At some point, they just shook hands with the guy.
Well, when he sent the telegram, the White House counsel's office sent back handwritten a giant no on it. And then the political director wrote a letter for another request saying, Donald Trump has a large ego, and large was underlined. So they knew, they had an idea of who he was.
Right.
What's interesting is that Reagan had hired Roy Cohn as his lawyer.
Yes. Because Nancy was close to Roy, wasn't she?
Yeah, Nancy and Roy Cohn were close. And Roy was one of her walkers in New York City. She had various walkers, I mean, the story of gang life and Republicans merits a volume. Up and through the present. It's very interesting. So Roy, who was Nancy Walker and Donald's attorney, couldn't arrange things for Donald. But eventually, Trump got himself to a social event at the White House, and he was in the receiving line. He shook hands with Reagan, and he was moved along. That's it. Nice to meet you. This is Donald Trump, and so on. He gets sent the, routine picture of himself shaking hands, and it's signed Reagan. Either Ronald Reagan had not signed it, or he
this
was
is long before he got ill. This is long before Reagan was losing it.
Alzheimer's,
Yes, right.
or it was an errant auto pen, of which Trump has made much of. In any case, Trump noticed it. They sent back a corrected photo, but Trump put the Reagan photo into as an illustration, a photo illustration, into the Art of the Deal book. And then there's more. That's just chapter 1 here. So we're in the book is published in 1987, and Donald Trump, having published The Art of the Deal, decides he should run for president. This is the first time he goes to New Hampshire. He goes up there.
1988.
He has a lunch. He has a rally. Doesn't run. But in his book, he attacks Ronald Reagan as weak. And of course, Reagan's image is that he's strong. Reagan's the first president, actually, to use the phrase "Make America Great Again." Trump is copied it.
Ripped it off.
Yeah. So he attacks Reagan as hollow. He says he's so smooth, so effective, a performer. Of course, Trump is desperate to be a successful performer.
There's some familiar stuff he goes after him for. He says that the other countries, the other countries of the world are taking advantage of us. He's sort of trying out what's going to be his standard foreign policy rap. That we're getting ripped off by Japan.
Exactly. It's 1987, and Ronald Reagan, who he attacks as nothing more than this. We don't know what's behind that smile. I get, Trump does not like smiles.
Well, that's very true.
His argument, as you point out, Sean, is exactly the same that he's made ever since. And it's unchanged regardless of any circumstance or any economic factors. Trump was a protectionist. He bought a full-page ad in the Times, the Washington Post, Boston Globe. He attacks Reagan, and he says, we need. He says, let's not let our great country being laughed at anymore. And he calls for a regime of protectionism, which we now have. And it doesn't matter to Trump what the facts are, and it never has from the beginning of time.
One last thing before we wrap up, and I want to make sure people get it. A lot of this more information is in Sidney's column, in the current column in The Guardian, where you'll hear about a lot of this and more. But at the end of that column, you referred to this earlier, the chaos that this whole thing has caused, and how the receipts have come in, and now they're going to have to be dealt with, and how people there's already a market in this money, right? And
there appears to be a market among financial firms or planning for dealing in the refunds and the receipts for that. Wired magazine reported that the financial firm of Cantor Fitzgerald, which was previously headed by Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who is negotiating many of the tariffs, are involved in it, has set up this market. The Cantor Fitzgerald denies that, and Secretary Lutnick denies that he's involved in this or that anybody's profiting from it. But Senators Ron Wyden and Elizabeth Warren sent a letter to Cantor Fitzgerald seeking answers to this question. As far as I know, they haven't fully responded to that letter except to deny that it's happening. And we will see if the Supreme Court does overturn Trump's tariffs and there are refunds, which financial firms will be engaged in fronting those refunds for a percentage, and whether Cantor Fitzgerald is involved or any other firms that have a relationship with the Trump administration. So, the shakedown, continues even when the policy is overturned.
Sure, grift, win-win. You can't lose. There's always an angle. There's always an angle. Well, so it turns out that my proposition to my students is wrong. Tariffs are actually very, very interesting the more you get into them. That is, possibly could be quite catastrophically destructive for the American economy.
Let me just, before we end, let's just end with the words of Ronald Reagan.
Very good.
Because the words of Ronald Reagan in that 1987 talk about tariffs. Ronald Reagan lived through the Great Depression. He was a New Dealer. He was an avid follower of Franklin D. Roosevelt, who got rid of the draconian Republican tariffs that had greatly deepened the Great Depression. And Reagan said, the memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes, for a short while, it works, but only for a short time. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse. Businesses and industries shut down and millions of people lose their jobs. And that's what Ronald Reagan said. And that's what triggered Donald Trump to impose an additional 10% tariff on Canada, basically affirming the warning of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this all turns out with the court. But for the moment, this court, speaking for Sidney Blumenthal and myself, Sean Wilentz, and don't forget to subscribe to Legal AF and also to read Sidney's column in The Guardian. It's all there. There are many more stories to come. But for now, regardless of that court, the court of history now stands adjourned.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.